Hi all, it's the last session of the day. I think mine runs about 55 minutes on the last practice, so if you can lock the doors, no one could leave. Some of my colleagues out there are making sure that they get an extra beer. Okay, I'm hoping that you've had a great Esri 2018. I hope you've actually had a good user experience, a good experience of Esri. So as Shelley said, I'm a tech lead and developer and geographer within the PS team in Brisbane. I've been fortunate over the last 7 years to work with many great clients on a variety of type of projects. And over the last 3 years, I've been fortunate enough to work on the Queensland Globe, leading a team of 4 developers plus UI designers, working with a client, considering how a user experience works, a 3D mapping application delivered to the public. Why UX? Why am I interested in UX? I'm a developer. I'm not a user experience expert, but I have seen user experience process work. I've seen people become less grumpy because they've thought about the user experience early. We've gone through the process. We've actually decided. We've actually worked with users, figured out what they need, figure out how they're going to be using the application, and at the end of the process, then we start to do the development, and we've actually gone and delivered a product that actually works for users. Users are going to have an experience with your application or whatever you build with your map, or your mobile application, or with your desktop viewer. What their experience is and what you've thought about how they're going to use it is going to really impact on how they perceive the application and how good they feel about using your application. At the end of this talk, I'm hoping that you'll take away one thing, which is make the call to think about user experience early, bring in user experience experts, designers, work together with clients and users in partnership, and to become an advocate for user experience in your organization. So user experience, UX, it's the user experience of your application, the whole of your application. When we're building something, when you're creating a mapping application or a mobile app, you're in control of these things. You're in control of the user interface, you're in control of the UI, you can pick and choose which APIs you're going to use, you can choose your services, figure out which services to use, how to get those services working well, and choose which data then goes into the application. And then that application is going to be, hopefully, used by a user, or not just one user, 10 users, hundreds of users, thousands of users. But think about those users. Who are they? Why are they going to use your application? What are they going to use that application for? When are they going to be using the application? And where are they going to be using that application? So this is supposed to be a technical session, so we're going to start thinking about from the developer side a little bit. Apologies for those that are not developers. Do we have any developers in the room? Okay, wow, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 7, I think I've counted, 8 maybe. So that's 3 more than Sydney. Okay, so we've got more developers in Brisbane than Sydney. That's fantastic. So when I think about my experience when I'm developing, what makes me happy? Well, actually, I like to code. A lot of developers do. That's why we do it. It's fun. We like to drink coffee because it gives us a chance to do some more code. Also, coffee's fun. And chat. We like learning stuff. We like thinking about the latest tech. We like thinking about great APIs. We like using them, thinking about frameworks. How can we use them? What's the next greatest thing to do? And a little bit more code. And on the development front, we've actually got a vast range of APIs within the Esri stack that we can use. The one that we use on, say, Globe, we use in the web applications, we use the JavaScript APIs, and we can mix that in with other frameworks. And for those developers in the room, I'll be showing about 10 lines of code later. But on developers.artgis.com, there's really, really good resources for any developers out there. Lots of samples. I'll show a couple later. Well-supported APIs. These are out-of-the-box APIs that have full support, almost like they're an application. And they give you the range from going out of the box with some customization and config, all the way through to a full-blown web application like Queensland Globe. Got the option to customize, extend, and build. But when you're starting to do your development work, you've got to stand back and think about what's the intent, what's the outcome that we want, and who are we building it for? So what comes first, user or intent, chicken or egg? So a lot of the time when we're starting a project, we'll know who the users are. The users will have come to us with a problem. They've got some aims that they want to solve, or they may even have a solution in mind. The alternative to this, the user, is actually that we're working with an organization who aren't in control of their users, but they've got an intent in mind. They're trying to reach out to a user audience, and they're trying to figure out what outcome that they want to, they're taking that and getting an outcome from that audience. So this is often the case when we're trying to engage with the public. We're not in control of the users. We can't make the users use our application. The third option, which is where UX perhaps doesn't work so well, is where you've already got a solution. It might be a fantastic solution, but you don't know what you're going to want to use it for, and you don't know who your target is. So you've got your solution, you're going to force it on somebody. User experience really, really works well when you know your users, or you've got an outcome in mind, and you can start thinking about the users that you're going to need to engage with to get that outcome. So thinking about the users, what makes users happy? Users are a little bit different from developers, apparently. Their needs are different. They don't enjoy writing code for some reason. I don't know. So when we're thinking about users, we should be at least trying to make them happy. We try to make them so they're not sad. We shouldn't be in a position where the worst part of their day is using our application. So when we start off, we've got minimum requirements often that have to be met. And if you think about the old waterfall model, where you actually might get a tender in, and you get a big list of functional requirements, this is actually perhaps where this lives. So we as developers and people involved on projects, we can meet all those functional requirements. We know how to do those. We can tick all those boxes. We might be able to complete that and convince somebody that from the point of view for the contract or the tender, we've actually met all those requirements, but the application might not actually be usable. It might not engage users. So you've got to think beyond what's the functional. Make sure it does everything required, but what's next? So then start to thinking about the users, starting to empathize with the users, start to think about, can we make that process, those functions, easy to use? Can we look at it and see if we can actually make it task-centric, make sure that the user can do what they're trying to do with this application? So when we start to think of this approach, we need to actually understand how the user's going to be using it and where they're going to be using it. And making sure that as they're going through those tasks, it's doing the functional component, but they're doing it without friction and without barriers. So I guess the next ideal is that it's actually fun to use. And this is really starting to get important when you're engaging with the public. When you're not forcing somebody to use your app, you're trying to attract them to use your application. So with something like the Queensland Globe, where the main target, the primary target, is actually the public, we want to make the friction low. We want to make it so that it's easy to use and that actually people can discover stuff quite easily. We want to elicit a positive emotional response from people. So think about the value there, especially when we're actually looking at public-facing applications. The high value is actually the further up that stack you can get. The higher up that stack you get, the better response you're going to get from your users. And it'd be great to have every application being fun to use, but at least you can try to aim to that. Okay, so how do we start going about thinking about our users? Well, first off, you need to actually understand who your users are. So you need to go out and identify who the users. Go out and do some research. If you can grab yourself a good anthropologist, they're amazing at going out and actually thinking about people in the abstract, writing down what they do, and producing great reports on people, and breaking them down into groups of people and understanding how they are doing their jobs. But we can't possibly go out there and interview every single user and engage with them. So we can start to think about breaking those users into personas. So personas are almost proxies for real users. They'll represent a type of user, so a type of role. So in this case here, we might have Raymond Burns. Give them a name. Raymond Burns is a GIS officer who's been doing GIS for 5 years in desktop. Start thinking about what their goals are. You can even think about personality. Give them a personality. Think about the motivations. Why are they going to be using your application? Think about their frustrations. What are going to be their frustration points? What are going to be the things that are a big challenge when they're using your application? I'm thinking there again about whether they're internal users or external, whether you're paying them to use your application or whether or not they're choosing to volunteer to use your application. So then once we've actually then gone through and identified the users, we start to think about how can we involve users in the design process. So go out there and grab a handful of the users, if you can get hold of them, and start to think about generating ideas with them. And from that, take those ideas, morph them into and create prototypes. And these prototypes can be as simple as a piece of paper with a sketch on. They don't have to be full-blown finished products. A prototype can be quite crude. Piece of paper, really cheap. You can throw it away if it doesn't work. From those prototypes, share it and describe how the application would work. Watch them flow. Get feedback from what you've done in the design process, and refine it, and prototype it again, and iterate through that process. And as you go through that process, refine, and you can start to get to, as you do it a couple of cycles through, you can start to go to wireframes. You can start to actually maybe build out a quick, lightweight prototype, and keep testing that. But that can all be done quite quickly. You can't, I'm not talking about something that's going to take 6 months here. I'm actually talking about something you can do this on paper in a couple of hours, a couple-hour workshop with some of your users. And then come back later, part of the way through the application development cycle, and do it again, Now think about in the Queensland Globe, we had design workshops relatively early on, and at the beginning of each release. So there'd probably be 2 sets of design workshops reaching out with users and key members of the department who would actually then challenge us on the designs. And then the UI agency would go away and they'd change the wireframes. And then they'd come back and we'd start again. We'd change that design. But that was done early in the piece before we'd start cutting code. But then when we started cutting code, we kept iterating. So every 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks that we started that project, we went into a room in front of a group of DNRM staff and clients and actually presented to them, hey, this is Queensland Globe. Doesn't do much at the moment, but we're starting down that process. This is the minimum we've got to in this first 2 weeks. Demo it. And then the next 2 weeks, we did another demo again. And the next 2 weeks, we did another demo again. That regular demonstration process does a couple of things. It gets feedback really early before you've committed down one particular path. You can make changes quickly. That can be less costly than making changes right at the end of a process. It means that actually by us actually delivering regularly, it's also keeping us honest. And I'm not saying that we're not honest anyway, but as developers, it means that actually we're having to show and present what we're doing regularly, and letting the users see what we're doing, and making sure that we're on track. I guess one of the great things from this on the globe was actually when we found out that one of our key clients was actually taking the application home on a regular basis and showing it and spending Sunday afternoon with his wife flicking through the application and then giving us feedback on the Monday morning. It gave my PM at the time a bit of a frowny face because sometimes there'd be a bit of change, but it actually felt good. So while you've actually done that UI design, start thinking about the application design, what's going to actually underpin that user interface. So thinking again, starting with the user, thinking about how they're going to interact with the design, and thinking about how the code's going to glue that design interaction together. And then thinking about the services, start thinking of map services you're going to need to deliver that, and the data you're going to need to actually be able to create the map services. You start thinking about these things early and how they all interact with each other, that's going to also contribute to a good user experience. Okay, so I think I might just flip around and just do a sort of a quick walkthrough of how this process might work. So we might get a brief. In this case, the brief was create a map application that shows the public, allows the public to survey beaches for plastic. They get to see the results and and the application then communicates the results to show the impact of plastic on the sea. So that's actually quite a high-level brief, but that might not be atypical of some of the ones that we get. And then you might get a big list of functional requirements. It must be able to export the report. It must be able to be used by a casual user. It must be able to do high-quality analysis. It must be able to be used out in the field. Some of those might be almost disparate requirements. It's actually sounding like it has to do a lot. So then, from your initial requirements, instead of you might then actually go away and start to think about the personas, the types of groups of people that are using this application. So right at the top, we've got the volunteer beach surveyor. We're trying to convince these guys to walk along the beach for 20 minutes. Walking along the beach for 20 minutes sounds pretty nice. Walking along the beach for 20 minutes, thinking about, I found some plastic, I found some more plastic, found some more plastic, found some more plastic. We're trying to get them to do something for us. We're trying to crowdsource data. We're not paying them to do this. We can't force them to do this. We want them to do this for us. So you think about what we're going to build for them. That's going to have to be relatively easy to use, and ideally it's going to have to be fun to use. It's going to be something, has to be something that's got a hook. Something's going to draw them to be doing it. Then following the beach surveying, we're going to have all this data out there, and other members of the public are then going to actually understand from that survey data what the impact of plastic on the beach is, what the quality of the beaches in our area. And then finally, there's going to be some researchers that are going to consume that data coming in, looking at data and the spread of plastic and doing analysis. So these are actually 3 distinct personas. So we might then start grabbing a couple of users, some of who you might see in the room maybe. Yep. Okay, so you grab a couple of those users and start doing some sessions to ideate. And when you're doing the ideation, making sure that you gather those ideas really quickly, do quick sketches. Give everybody a pen and paper. Make sure that more than one person, that everybody in the room, not just one person, gets heard. People sometimes are a little bit shy to do crude sketches. Some of these are a bit crude up here, of what an application might look like or what a problem might look like. But actually, if everybody starts doing it and they see everybody's sketches are a little bit crude, then they'll get into a pattern of they'll start getting excited about doing something. Once you've actually generated ideas from people, get people to do a quick summary about what they think that solution is going to be, what that application is going to do. Making sure, again, you've got the voices heard. You can then actually go through and figure out what ideas from each of those ideas work together and start merging those ideas together. You can then maybe do another iteration, again on paper, trying to understand what's going to happen. So user experience expert can guide you through this process. So from that workshop, you might actually start to think about what's going to be required, how you're going to use the application. And given that initial brief actually was trying to get something to do a lot, you might start to think about, actually, really, are there 3 applications here? Are there 3 different distinct use cases? So one decision here you can make is to create target applications. So you create a separate survey app. Now you could use survey 1, 2, 3, or collectors potentially to go down the beach, but you may actually decide, I want to have something that's custom, that's going to allow quick, rapid connection, that's actually going to guide my user through the process and be a little bit more fun to use. The survey app's going to target these volunteers, and it's going to be very task-focused. It's going to allow them to do that task, gather that data really quickly while they're walking down the beach, hopefully still having a little bit of fun as they're walking down. And then after that, you've got the data to present. Now, I think in a couple of the other sessions, we've seen some great story maps out there and how story maps work for communicating, and almost like a magazine type style, that casual reader. So story maps communicate the message really, really well to the public. So we might use that for there. And then for the final user, for the researcher and the person that's doing administration, let's just use Web App Builder to build a simple web map application, and then have that more powerful analytical data that you don't, analytical tools, which you don't want to input in front of your targeted volunteers, have that in there. So again, once you start breaking this apart, you might start to do some journey mapping. So again, crude sketches, but journey mapping might actually do a walkthrough of how you actually use that application, how the person walking up the beach is going to use that application. So they might quickly start walking up the beach. They're going to start. We want them to walk up the beach for 20 minutes, recording all the piece of plastic, bigger than a 50-cent coin. Going to tell them how long they've been going, how far they've walked, and how many pieces of plastic, and what types of plastic, and allow them to actually indicate which types of plastic. And then at the end of the process, when they finish the survey, maybe share the results on Facebook or some sort of social media, as well as pushing to our application, to our solution. And perhaps potentially from that Facebook, maybe that then links to the story map. So from that journey mapping process, you might start to break that down and start to do UI design that we think about traditionally. So start to build out wireframes and start to create mock-ups and then higher resolution versions of the application. And then from those application design, we actually start to think about, again, from that user interface, code, services, and data, what are we going to need? We might start to think then about prototyping something up. So again, for the developers in the room, we've got a little bit of code. So just going to create, in this case here, we've just mocked up a quick prototype as a custom web application. We're just going to use it to prove that UI works in the field. So this is something we can actually code up very quickly and actually take it out and actually walk along the beach. Sounds like a great testing session. I might need to do that on my next project. Maybe I'll get to walk on the beach in the next project, maybe. I don't know. It's using the JavaScript API, JS API 4.9, and using a framework called Vue.js. The JS API works well with lots of different frameworks, of UI frameworks. And in this case, we've chosen to take styling from guided by material design. So looking at the JavaScript API, oh, that's not worked. I'm going to have to do this. So, as I said, there's a JavaScript API. It's got lots of samples out there to start and use. Great samples out there for doing visualization. This is actually one of my favorite ones at the moment, which is actually looking at temporal change as we go through. This is actually buildings as they're built in New York. And here's one that we're going to start using some of the code from, which is actually used in the Vue.js API framework. And then here's our sample quick prototype. So a couple of hours, pull together a quick prototype that allows users to start walking along the beach. And as they walk along the beach, add additional items. And as you start building that prototype out, you'd allow them to select what types of plastic they've been finding. So for the developers, we're creating a map. We're putting that map inside a 3D view. So this is a 3D view. You can work on the mobile device. And then we're using Vue.js to create components to actually build that UI out. So then thinking about the story map. So I don't know if how many of you guys have actually seen the Human Reach story map. This is a story map, so this is how we might actually then start thinking about that second stage, how we communicate with the public. This story map actually shows the growth of, tells people about the growth of the population. And shows that human footprint, the population density. Go to Australia. It shows how dark Australia is compared to how unpopulated parts of Australia is. So there's many of these story maps out there that do that storytelling about how we impact the environment. So then the third application we said that we'd actually build. So the story map, then we can actually, this is Story Map Builder. So Story Map Builder lets you create these story maps really quickly. It allows you, it's just a templated application. From the end of that templated application though, you can download and host that code locally on your own servers. You can modify that templated application to do whatever you want. And similarly as well with Web App Builder for that final group of people. You can actually drag widgets, change the map, and start to build your application up. So here you see that we've actually just added the web map that we created for showing those data points as they walk up the beach. So here you see we've actually used those templated applications to communicate and then explore that data. Going through that whole cycle again of custom survey map targeted at public users that we're requesting, we're hoping to try and get those users, those volunteers to use our application. We've then got that story map that's focusing on the public, almost in a magazine type style, and a web app builder application that is targeting the admins and researchers. Each of these are simple and task focused. And underpinning those, we've either got web maps or web scenes. They're where you construct your map. Think about that. I'd also encourage you to think about the cartography as part of that design process, part of the UI. Thinking about themes and interactions. Are the colors going to work together? Are there going to be interactions as you roll over a feature? Is that feature going to use the same color template in the application? Is there going to be that strong visual link? The moment there seems to be a resurgence in cartography, particularly in the US and Europe, thinking about new visualizations, thinking about how we use 3D and how animation works in our applications. So I encourage you all to become a UX advocate. Good UX is a great investment. You've got increased user engagement. People are going to start using your application. You've got a decrease in rework. You should have a decrease in training costs, and hopefully less grumpy people. So a couple of user examples you might want to have a look out there. Do a search for the Age of Humans story maps. Have a look at the Queensland Globe. From the resources side, we've got under esriaustralia.com.au, we've got the UXG, the User Experience for Geography, which is resources for thinking about user experience. Developers.artgs.com for the developers in the room. And have a look at the UX videos from the Esri events. On the cartography side, for those especially who might not have actually started using ArcGIS Pro yet, go and have a look at the Cartographer Mooc. So this is actually a 6-week, 4 hours a week training course that's given free to anybody with an ArcGIS subscription. And it's a great way of actually learning about new techniques in cartography, especially in 3D. There's getting started with story maps, and again, the development under the training catalogue.